Welcome to the 3Haunted podcast, where we bring you all things horror, supernatural, folklore, mythology, and all things that go bump in the night.
What's up, everybody? This is your co-host, Ashley Lunar Goddess, Gorilla Girl filmmaker and horror-loving cinephile. I'm just your average podcast-producing badass.
I'm John Thomas. Some would say that I go a little too far with my love of all things horror, paranormal, and meta, but I say, talk nerdy to me, and I'm all yours.
What's up, ghouls, gals, and all of our horror fans out there? In today's episode, we'll be returning to the world of horror films with special guest filmmaker Justin Robert Vinall. Justin is co-founder of the film production company Next Floor Entertainment. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And thanks again for just letting me jump on board and talk about all things horror film related.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of our favorite topics. So, Justin, how long have you been in the world of filmmaking?
Oh gosh, I've been wanting to make movies since like I was a kid, like as far back as it's like watching like Jurassic Park when I was 3 with my grandma popped it on because I was a big Godzilla fan growing up. Like I watched a bunch of like I was into dinosaurs that obviously led to Godzilla, so I watched a bunch of Godzilla growing up, and then when I saw Jurassic Park, that kind of changed everything. Where I was like, oh wow, I don't know what this is exactly, but I love like seeing the spectacle of these dinosaurs, the vibrance of these characters, and the music, and just the emotion and the drama, the horror, the storytelling of it all. I just fell in love with the movie, and that kind of like put me onto the path of like want to be a writer, producer, and director. I didn't know what exactly those were at the time growing up, but like as you continue to age, you start to kind of figure out what pieces go where and all that jazz. And professionally, I've been working in Washington and Seattle film in particular for since 2015 professionally, but I've been like making stuff as far back as like I don't know, since I was a kid all the way through high school. Did a lot of theater, and then
And then moved on up to the pros. Did you go to film school, or is this all self-taught?
A lot of it was self-taught, but I did go to Shoreline. I looked at I went to a summer kind of like camp in high school when Seattle Film Institute was kind of getting its feet off the ground. So it was still kind of a very early like film school program, but they had like a 2-week summer crash course taught at the time by an editor in Seattle named Kirk Nordenstrom. Who runs the 48-hour film festival, 40-hour film festival, and he's a great instructor and friend. And I did 2 weeks of that, and then I went to Shoreline Community College because at the time there was other colleges and institutes that I was looking at, but they weren't like quite as I think strong or had connections that I resonated more within Seattle film than what Shoreline Community College had to offer at the time. Looking at it now, like Seattle Film Institute's kind of grown by a lot, and Shoreline continues to grow. I know I was really surprised to find out UW didn't really have a strong film program, so kind of like the film resources in schools that I was looking at, what weren't, I guess, like available at the time. So Shoreline had a plethora of great instructors and great people that I still work with professionally in the industry.
Does Seattle have a pretty big film presence?
Yeah, I would say it does. I would argue that it's hard to say right now because of just kind of everything that's like been kind of happening within the last couple of years between the pandemic and the strikes that had been happening. I think there was a efficient plan to kind of get more work and funding in Seattle and just Washington in general. Between Seattle and Spokane in particular, those are two places where I think a lot of efforts are trying to be made. And I know there's like rural, like kind of like Kitsap County and other counties that don't have like the film kind of presence. They want to expand those reaches and have filmmakers and stories be told from that area as well. And I think they're still kind of getting their footing together a bit more. I would say the last couple years it's been more about kind of building things again. Execution wise, we've had shows here that I think have had a strong that have done well for like bringing union jobs here and having people like create TV shows and feature films here. But I think the biggest issue is some of those feature films and those TV shows don't like leave like a crazy impact culturally here for people to be attracted to come here outside of the touristy obvious stuff. And a lot of like kind of our glory days of like film in Washington was more 90s to 2000s. And we had a show here called Three Busy Debras that did pretty well on Adult Swim, but then it got canceled on its second season. And now we don't have a show that we can, return to. And I think right now it's like we have a lot of these passion projects, and nothing wrong with passion projects here, but I think financially and economically, this past year in particular, I think Seattle film has struggled in terms of like moving forward between the big tech companies kind of becoming more making content within their own space as opposed to outsourcing in-house. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
There's a lot more of like relying on like the automation of technology. AI is a massive thing right now, and it's been a lot of cutbacks on things. So a lot of my colleagues that have done well in the past are struggling right now. So while I think Seattle film is present here, I do think that is a concerning time just because of like the evolution of things, strikes, post-pandemic stuff, all the fun real world stuff. But I'm hopeful that next year, and as we keep saying it, we hope things get better and better as time goes on. But I'm at the very least, between the pandemic being over, strikes for the time being done right now, and hopeful that things will blossom for Seattle film. So
Yeah, you make a really good point. A lot of the bigger companies that used to hire in the independent film production offices are going in-house, and they actually build their own studios inside of their corporate buildings and tend to be hiring more of their in-house production teams, which can be great if that exists and you apply directly for those teams. But oftentimes people don't know that's a thing. Like, oh,
yeah,
that company has a studio and needs a cinematographer.
Yeah, like the I know Microsoft has a building that has the I forget, it's what Mandalorian uses it. It's called the sound, or it's like the giant like LED wall that like creates like backgrounds and whatnot. So I know Microsoft has one of those things, but as far as I'm aware, that's not allowed for the public to be used. And they have like 3 other sound stages, and it's like Seattle has one arguably one sound stage that's used south of Seattle. The other sound stage, quote unquote, is an old factory that's being refurbished as a studio, and I think they purchased it and are looking to update it over time. It's on Harbor Island. It's referred to as Harbor Island Studios. Three Busy Debras shot their second season there, and I worked on a portion of Love Is Blind there when they were doing a little bit of interviews there. But the space is not very, I would say, film friendly. I can understand like the space being great space wise, but like in terms of like parking and its use of its sound and whatnot, it's just there's a lot of challenges that will need to be addressed, and it's on the water too, so it's very I think it's a very difficult spot to create work with. I'd be curious to see how they evolve it over time. But working there just recently and within the last year, I'm like, I see why they want to keep it in Seattle, but like again, like I think it is a concerning spot for sure, in terms of just like, just we have this building here, we can shoot stuff. Where it's like, well, what about X, Y, and Z? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a catch-22 too. Or, that sounds funny. It's a catch-22 as well when you've got these sound studios, but you don't have the work to put like for them because we don't have the incentives. So
Yeah.
they were talking about like in Colorado building a big studio because we get sometimes occasional productions here. But the idea is that our incentives, our film incentives, aren't strong enough.
Yeah.
And so a lot of companies don't want to come here anymore, a lot of production companies to film because just the incentives have gotten worse here. And so they're like, well, if we build the studio, they will come. And it's like, no, because you still have a problem with your incentives.
Well, it's the incentives and then infrastructure. Like there's one,
Yeah.
as far as I'm aware, there's one outsource that you can get production gear from. Whereas like the reason why people keep going back to Vancouver is that there's, decades upon like infrastructure there between, studios, hundreds of people that are working those departments. Like what, like they have their own tax thing going on over there as well. It's like it's a whole different beast there. So it's like, it's brutal. Like, it used to be our competition was between us and Portland. Now it's like Portland, us, and Vancouver.
And Vancouver.
Yeah, so it's like, we are known more as a commercial town than anything else within like maybe the last 15 years. So like, it's more about like, we're comfortable with this kind of like tech world kind of filmmaking, but now that that's kind of withering down a bit, it's like, all right, well, the identity for Washington film is kind of at a standstill at the moment. So you hope
you're
that,
at a crossroads.
Like, yeah, at a crossroads, 100%. And it's like you hope that you can, with all this stuff, I don't necessarily think Harbor Island is the greatest move in terms of like moving forward, but it is a move that I think is something to at least jump on for maybe like small projects. In terms of like bigger projects, I'd be curious to see how Paramount would look at that space and be like, huh, okay. So because like at the end of the day, it's like a lot of like there are like old IKEA warehouses in California that are used for like shows and whatnot. So like you can turn these things around, but again, when you have it on the water and you are trying to drive through like 3 train tracks, it's a little dicey, and there are definitely more plethora of problems to be mindful of moving forward. So yeah,
some things they're going to have to address. Now, with that said, you and we have a connection with each other, pre-existing, the podcast appearance. So many moons ago, there was this festival out there, and it was called Trapped. And
oh yeah, dude, Trapped was so good. I love Trapped. Trapped was a vibe and a half.
Go ahead and say that again. No.
What? Trapped was a vibe and a half. I loved. I was just thinking about that the other day because I was looking at festivals to submit for. We were doing another run for From the Depths for one more year, just because I still think it's got a little bit more sea legs. And I was looking at Trapped again. I was like, oh yeah, I wonder if they're going to be popping off again. So, but yeah, no, I really enjoyed Trapped when that was going on.
Yeah, that definitely one of my favorite moments in time for sure. So it had the 2 years, and I think that if we were going to revive Trapped, which I've been asked to bring it back in the film portion, but as well as in the screenwriting competition.
Ooh, yeah.
And the second year, so the first year was just horror. The second year we did expand it, open it up a bit to include drama because some people were like, well, could we do a little bit of that? And so we tried it out. I think if I were going to bring it back for a third year, it would go back to its roots, horror only.
Yeah.
I like
And
that idea.
it was a vibe. I enjoyed it. Like, with COVID, people weren't really sure about like, how do you make live stream happen? But we did the damn thing. Like it was an experience and it was fun.
Yeah, I remember like when COVID did happen, everything, we were in a bunch of festivals and they were transitioning over to like doing live streams and whatnot. It was a really interesting kind of experience, and I was really like, um, you know, watching kind of like how each festival is kind of handling and everything. And I thought it was a kind of an enriching experience in a way too, and a very unique experience in terms like immediate, like, you get like a lot of eyes on it, and it's like all in this kind of like, yeah, live broadcast kind of way. It was very compelling to kind of be a part of.
Yeah, and having the option to engage with people as they're watching it.
Yeah.
So the filmmakers can be in the chat as people are reacting to their
That
movie,
was
for
fun.
better or worse.
Yeah.
And talk to them and kudos them, like, oh my God, dude, that was amazing. Like that.
Yeah.
It's such an experience.
That was a blast. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I typically like to sit in the very back of a theater and watch because my whole theory is you can always tell how someone is enjoying or not enjoying a film by the way they sit. Like I love, like if they're leaning forward or they're leaning back like that, or if they're like, how they're sitting in their chair is very telling. But like, I think when you have something like that, people are very honest and very direct, because like, again, it's like, there is a disconnect, but there's also like a excitement there too, in terms like wanting to express how they're feeling about a particular story that they're watching. So yeah, I really enjoyed Trapped, and how these other festivals works their virtual screenings.
Yeah, I remember I reached out to you after the festival because you were in the Trapped Film Festival 2020 edition, and I'd reached out to you to give you extra kudos because I loved your film. I loved the aesthetics of it, the color choice, like the palette choice, and actually your film won best actress.
Oh,
I
yeah,
believe it was Erin.
Erin,
Yep.
right? Yeah. She's tremendous. I loved working with Erin, and yeah, Purple Vision was a really good film. In terms of like having an ensemble piece and just kind of playing on the kind of like Twilight Zone irony, like spin on Love Potion and whatnot. And Erin, just a very visually engaging like performance to watch. So
Yeah, absolutely. Erin emotes in a way that, directors dream of. So
yeah, I lucked out with her a lot, for sure. She's great. She's great. She doesn't like that's not her main thing, acting. She's done acting. She's done like theater and everything, and she'll do short films once in a while, but she primarily works with music. So whenever
What?
yeah, I know. It was kind of wild, because I think she's in Emiko, because I had someone else for the part that she had like a bit part in a dream sequence, and we had someone else, but they dropped out. So I was looking at my so at the time my producer's girlfriend, and I was like, you have a very interesting look. It's weird for me to say that, but like, would you want to do this thing? But then I realized that I was a photographer for this studio that I was learning of like lighting and photography from like right out of high school, and one of the and his main gig was like going to shoot like these high school musical or like college musical showcases within like the Mukilteo, greater like Linwood Edmonds area. And Erin was in a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. So it was before I met my producer Brian, before I met her, but I knew her from that. And then when we were talking more, I was like, oh wait, you were in that thing that I did photography for, and you were great in that. So I know you know how to act. And so she's tremendous. And of course, like, in Emiko she's great, which led her to Purple, and then, so on and so forth. No, she's tremendous.
Yeah, Purple Vision was just one of those beautiful horror films that was disturbing. So anybody that watches it, like, it's a great time, but definitely it is horror. But that was a fun one. Now, for the films, because I know you're continuing the film journey, are you still consistently with like your personal projects? Are you staying with horror, or do you do other genres as well?
The funny thing is, like, so I remember when I was 6, I came out of my room for some reason, and I was going around the corner to the living room where my parents were watching Alien. But it happened to be the moment with the chestburster scene. And I was like, fuck that shit. And I hated horror for a long time. I was not a horror fan for a long, long time. Like bringing it back to Jurassic Park, the Dilophosaurus scene with the rattle like little thing around his neck and the black ink, like that scared the shit out of me too. And I was like, I can't, I gotta leave the room until it's done. And for a long time, I was always kind of I always kind of tipped, like I always was like kept away from horror. I was more gravitated towards like drama and like and like character rise and falls. Like I don't know, like watching like it's kind of a crude example, but like Scarface is like, like a really great kind of rise and fall like character piece, or like just kind of seeing the evolution of a character and the de-evolution of a character. So I did a lot of like work with drama and whatnot, and then after doing kind of a bit of drama, I was like, well, I want to dabble around with different genres and see what fits the most. So I tried comedy, because I find comedy to be the hardest and kind of the scariest thing to work with, because it is a quickly aging thing, unless you're like there's great examples of like physical comedy or the pratfall comedy of Chris Farley, who's like the king of of falling in comedies, and Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, classics. But like comedy today is so hard to make. So like I struggled with making comedy, and then after I'd made a comedy and that worked, I was like, okay, well, let's keep dabbling with different genres. And then I was like, well, let's try horror again. And as soon as I made this horror film called This Pretty Face that did pretty well, and I was starting to meet like a bunch of horror filmmakers and was kind of falling back in love with horror. And so then I kind of got back into like wanting to really embrace everything that was horror. And ever since, every project I've made has been horror since like 2015, 2014. And I've just loved the genre so much. And I think the genre is it's so widely expanding, and there's so much subgenre that you can play with, and you can have themes be as small as as a traumatic experience that someone is dealing with, like Repulsion is kind of a good movie to look at in terms or Hour of the Wolf is a good example, more so, where it's more subtle with like someone going through this mental kind of nightmare, or you can have it be as loud and grotesque about The Fly is a great example of here's an example of the AIDS epidemic at the time, and how that affects this relationship, but as someone turning into The Fly. So it's like, I think horror is such a rich genre, and I'm like very much so like staying in that horror lane. So
yeah, I love that you're like, it wasn't for me, and now speed forward to today, you're in the horror genre and you're wearing the Thing beanie. So.
Big. I mean, yeah, like a lot of my favorite movies, and like as soon as I made that horror film, I completely turned back around and was like, oh my gosh, it's such a rich and huge genre, and I've just really and there's so many great films that just come from that genre nowadays too, and more so than ever. So it's been a really great time to kind of really be loving the genre and moving forward with the genre.
So for the films that are coming out now, like what would you say are some of your favorites?
I like everything that Robert Eggers makes. He made the Witch, the Lighthouse, Northman. I think he's coming out with a remake of Nosferatu next year. With what's his name? He was Pennywise in the new It.
Yeah,
Bill
it's Skarsgård.
Yeah,
Yep.
Bill Skarsgård, and I think that's a filmmaker that is making horror that is like you wouldn't really feel like you see nowadays. I've been real like I look at Rosemary, I look at The Witch, and I'm like, oh, this is like, like almost like akin to like, the feeling of terror and old supernatural kind of like not like your typical jump scare ending or this or that. It's very much so ingrained in its own folklore and just like kind of like living within like the liberated evil of it all, I guess.
I love that liberated evil.
Liberated evil. I don't know. Reminded me of like Rosemary's Baby, where it's like there's so much tension and atmosphere, and the same goes for The Witch, and how that movie ends is very, I think, similar in terms of like how someone feels free and whatnot in a very kind of I don't know how to explain it other than this feels very old school. It feels very like, it's not like following a certain thing. It's just following this theme all the way to the very end of the film. And that's kind of what the Witch at the end of the day is very much so like a feminist piece about, embracing oneself as they grow older and whatnot, and just kind of being free from the traditional surroundings and conditions that that family in the film created. So I think all of Robert Eggers' stuff is something definitely to look at. And anything. I mean, just mentioning Godzilla -1 just came out, and not quite a horror film, but there's definitely echoes of like horror within that film itself that I adore. And that in Godzilla in of itself, it has a lot of horror qualities throughout like its entirety of its franchise. And then I mean, I love Midsummer. Midsummer is great, and
so you just went like hard left there.
Oh yeah, did I?
I'm kidding.
I mean, that's out there.
You're like, we do the slow burn of the
oh yeah,
the
then,
Witch,
yeah,
and then it's like bam, Midsummer.
Well, it's good to have both, because then
it's well-rounded.
You want to like, you don't want to just like have like, I don't want to be just the film, like I don't want to just enjoy a horror film because it's a slow burn. I want to enjoy, like, I love like like I actually like, I really enjoy the Friday the 13th remake that came out like I think 10 years ago, I think maybe, or so. More so the Michael. It was fun, yeah. Or like, I think I'm in the minority with this one, but I love Halloween Ends. I think Halloween Ends rips. More so over Halloween Kills.
Look at John's face.
No, you don't like Halloween Ends? Oh no, dude, no.
Halloween Ends can kiss my butt.
You were so good in that.
Yeah, that one, it lost me. Like, I'll rewatch it again and see how I feel, but watching it the first time, I was like, what in the hell are they doing?
Was it because I think the thing that I always like think that people don't like about. Well, I'm curious. What do you not like about it? Is it how Michael Myers was kind of treated
not
in
in the movie? Like, yeah. It was not his movie. It was like,
but
it
Corey
was this
Cunningham.
kid. Like, yeah,
well, that's the thing. It's evil takes all these different shapes and whatnot.
I get that, but
yeah.
like, let's not call it Halloween then. Let's not.
That's fair.
Just like you could take Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which I didn't like growing up, but now I absolutely
You watch your
love.
mouth.
I love it though. No, I wasn't finished. Like, growing up, I didn't like it, but now, even if you took Halloween out of it, Season of the Witch is great. It's a good movie.
Yeah,
Just
it's a
take
good
Halloween
what?
out of it. Like,
yeah, it's like a good
yeah.
science fiction kind of like
Exactly.
romp and whatnot. Yeah,
Exactly. That's kind of how I feel about Halloween Ends. Like, it belongs somewhere else, not with
That's fair.
This trilogy.
I didn't mind it more so because I was like, what are you doing with the character of Michael Myers at this point? Because like, between like the first film and all the way through the Thorn trilogy, and to the remakes and everything, I just feel like there's not much there. I mean, with Jason, it's like Jason is like, I find Jason to be endlessly fascinating because you do put him in all these different settings and you do change his characteristics over time. They're not like super like they don't have a dramatic range, but I do find him being put in certain situations, like fighting like the girl that has the psychic powers, is really interesting, or having him seeing him become that full-blown zombie mode in that powerful zombie mode in Jason Lives and whatnot. Like, I find Jason to be far more of a compelling character than I do Michael Myers, and it's interesting with Michael Myers because I feel like there is a lot that you can play with there, but I feel like he gets a little lost later on because they're like, well, we don't know what exactly to do with him at a certain point, like especially like during the Thorn trilogy. I was like, interesting. Whereas with Halloween Ends, it's like, again, it's just like, I think what attracted me the most about it is I like to see characters that we have grown to love become losers. So like Last Jedi I like a lot because I like to see Luke Skywalker, this fabled I like to see
You are becoming sworn enemies.
No, I like about it. Well, I think Last Jedi is not a perfect film at all, and I have a lot of. I do not like the flying Leia or anything, but there are things
weird,
and not committing to the ending of like the gray of the light and dark side. Like they touch on that, but they don't commit to it. What I like about it though is the characterization of Luke, because Luke, is supposed to be this idealistic, very like, joyful kind of like spirited character. And then when you meet him, he's like completely like lost and defeated and, abandoning and whatnot. And he's just he's a loser in it. And then, he eventually finds himself and, helps to help the resistance escape and whatnot, just because like, what is it that Yoda says like, failure is our greatest teacher. And for me, it's like, oh, that's really interesting to see Luke come to terms with this and accept his fate to have this next generation move on. And that's what I like about kind of like Halloween Ends, is like seeing this next generation of evil take the same embodiment of Michael Myers and move forward. While Michael Myers, definitely takes a back seat in that, more than, I think people would like to see. But I totally understand where people are coming from, both on the Halloween end, like not liking Halloween Ends and not liking Last Jedi and all that. But for me, I love like watching Megatron be a loser in Transformers 3. Like, I love seeing like these characters that are at the very top be at the ground floor and just, see how the world reacts to them and whatnot. So I think, again, it's like I like really flawed characters like that. More so seeing the essence of evil move on to like this next generation, how evil will always continue to mutate and, all that jazz.
Well, I would like to say that I liked The Last Jedi, so take that.
I'm sorry.
Y'all can all take that. I liked the direction they went with the new ones. I know we all want to be nostalgic and have what we were holding on to, but if you're going to continue the world, I'm not mad on how they did it. That's my dorkdom coming through. I'm probably one of the few people that absolutely loves Kylo Ren too.
Oh,
so.
Kylo Ren's he's a good character, because I feel like he's the. This is becoming a Star Wars episode, but like once I get into it, but once
you chose the right people.
I think it's a fully realized character. I think you look at look at Last Jedi. Instead of having Finn be the character that goes on this journey with Rose, have it be with Poe, because Poe put Rose's sister in that situation that got her killed. It was for the cause, but like you could have built some interesting drama and tension, and even perhaps have her change sides. And I think there could have been a lot more interesting characterization between those two characters, rather than have Poe be stuck on the ship and have Finn do something else. Finn's kind of a weird character because I feel like they weren't sure where to move him at the end of the day. But Kylo feels like a fully realized, I think, character through and through. Rey's lightsaber is sick, though, in Rise of Skywalker.
I think when it came to Finn, or all of them, honestly, I think that they had hopes that this was going to take off. And I feel like whoever it was had like a Dexter board in their office and had ideas of where they were going to go. Yeah. And then was going to go on this epic adventure. It just didn't happen because, well, I don't think people received this world, this new incarnation of characters as well as they hoped that they would.
I think they're at odds with themselves, and there's the first film that's like bringing like again like I think people tend to forget that Star Wars was in a very fragile place when Episode 7 came out, so it's like it was kind of a big deal to bring everyone back. So it's like I'm fine with the first film, with that first film being kind of a retread, but it needs to then move ahead. And I think Last Jedi does that relatively successfully, but with some errors along the way. And then I feel like because of how that film was received, there was a complete backtrack. Like, well, hang on, we got to take it way back to more nostalgia. Death Star, Palpatine somehow returns. Like I feel like they really dropped the ball with Rise of Skywalker in terms of like characters kind of getting lost other than Kylo Ren, and just relying on I mean, I think it would have made more sense to have like Darth Plagueis be a character that comes into play as opposed to Palpatine, just because like Plagueis is a character that's mentioned early on, and he's trying to cheat death. And how else would you end the trilogy than like have the character that was kind of like behind all of this from the very beginning? But or just ultimately have Kylo be the villain. Like I don't know. Like I feel, or I don't know. You could do what if-isms all day with like the sequel trilogy, but at the end of the day, it's like they exist. They've always created like I always think they create spirited discussions, and I'm curious to see kind of how Star Wars changes over time. I'm particularly interested in James Mangold's like first era of Jedi. Like it's a Jedi film that's coming out that he's making that talks about the first Jedi. So I'm kind of interested with that. And yeah. So and Mandalorian is good, and Andor's great. So there's a lot of good Star Wars, not so much good Star Wars, but there's definitely a healthy amount of Star Wars out there.
I'm not mad at it. And maybe it is because, like you said, Kylo Ren was so realized. And because I did like relate to that character in some way, and I did really latch onto it, and that I was forgiving of other things. Because there were definitely, when I watched it, there were definitely moments that it was just like, that could have been executed better. But
for sure,
that definitely, I think, because I know Rey was supposed to be the emphasis. Kylo really took it, in my opinion. He just really was the shining star.
Yeah.
And I had hopes they would go somewhere with Finn, because it seemed like like you said, he was almost there, but he wasn't. And so I was hoping they'd have more with Finn, but I don't know. I don't know if they plan to pick up any more. If that's what we get.
I don't know. I know there's a whole new like Rey trilogy that they're
for those characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what they do with Rey moving forward, because I feel like Daisy Ridley kind of got the dull end of the stick with that. She didn't really get like a fair shake with that character, right? Because that character was like, ooh, let's surround her in mystery. And it's like, well, I think it's more impactful if she's a nobody, but to make her like related to someone, and that gives her specialty. I don't know, like. And like I get what they're trying to do too. It's like, but that's the whole point of Luke Skywalker, is like he's this character that is like the son to like this man that's murdered so many people and is like the embodiment of evil. But that like here's Rey, that's kind of, it's retreading the same thing, but it's like embracing a different name in the end. But I don't know. It seems like it seems more of the same to me in that respect. But I'd be curious to see how they move forward with Rey, and I'm hopeful for Daisy Ridley to really showcase more of that character than what she was what the character was offered in the original in the sequel trilogy.
She felt more like, to me, like life's happening around her versus she is the agent of it. I'm going to get really dorky here, but she felt like a Harry Potter to me. Everybody around her is the one actually solving the problems and carrying her through. Yeah. And just kind of like it's happening, but because she's got that mystery legacy behind her, that makes her important. But I'd really like to see them bump up her complexity so that importance is realized, whatever it may be. Like, yes, she's got powers. Yes, she goes to find Luke, and yes, all of these things. But she felt, especially having her matched against Kylo, she felt a lot more one note. So to your point, she's a solid actress. Like, again, her ability to emote is amazing. I'd love to see them put her more to use because she's got it in her.
Yeah, I hope that there more comes from that character at the end of the day, because with the comparison to Harry Potter, it's like I think the thing that helped Harry Potter throughout that franchise was like you could feel the burden and the weight of him like being like, oh, I'm this chosen one that survived this, and I'm looked at differently and everything. Whereas Rey is just she's just going through the world and stuff's happening. But yeah, no, I'm hopeful for a more enriching Star Wars future.
Yes, and I'm hoping Kylo Ren didn't really die. So, spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't watched it, that's on you.
Yes. I will say, yes, I like Kylo Ren, but you know what? Fuck you, Kylo. You killed your father, and that pisses me off still. I'm still not over it.
But without that, Chewie couldn't have had his most epic scene ever.
I know, but
can we talk about Chewbacca's epic rage? Like, I probably was the only one cheering in the theater during that scene.
I was too busy crying.
Chewbacca going from this lunky sidekick to just full rage machine shooting up the whole place. Like, yes. I was, I'm just going to be that dork. Like, I was cheering Chewbacca on. It was sad. It was fucked up. Absolutely. But,
I mean, we knew it was going to happen. We did. You couldn't sit there and watch it and not know that it was going to happen. But, fuck you, Kylo.
I knew it was coming because that's, film. You want to talk about film theory? Like, every fucking film does it. You have to kill the safe character.
Yeah.
Dumbledore had to die. Han had to
Scream
die.
5.
Safe characters have to die for the hero to continue their hero's arc. So.
Scream 5. I forgot about. That's
fucking
such a
Dewey.
bummer.
They
death.
killed my
Dewey.
What the fuck?
That was bullshit.
I couldn't believe that.
Even Nev said that was bullshit.
Yeah, because it's like, man, no matter what, no matter how many times you stop these guys, they just keep coming back, and it's like they're gonna get you eventually. And I was like, that sucks. That's kind of a bad message. It's just like, oh man.
Now I don't want to watch it anymore.
I was hoping Courtney would get it, but no, Dewey got it. Fuck, no Gale, Dewey.
I wouldn't get any of them.
I mean, I'd be okay if Gail got it, but but
Dewey, my boy.
I know.
Who
man.
does that? That's awful.
Yeah. I mean, like he said,
but he is the safe character.
Yeah, and also he said, "I've been stabbed 9 times. Do you think I really want to go through this shit again?" Like, no, I don't. And then he fucking does it anyways. Like, fuck it. Gotta shoot him in the head. I gotta be the hero.
As soon as he said that line, I knew. I'm like, you're dead.
Yep. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Dewey. Thanks.
Deputy Dewdog. Oh, man. That was sad. Okay, so do you have a favorite subgenre? Like, for me, I love the vampire genre best.
Ooh. I love, it's either between, body horror or cosmic horror. It's one of those two. I really like. I mean, maybe body horror because, I don't know. I do. I'll
flip a coin.
I'll flip a coin. I'll just go with body horror just because there's a lot more films I can pull from that. Because I love mentioning The Fly, just seeing the de-evolution of someone. And I'm actually currently writing a film that's a vampire film that is about kind of someone that is refusing to become a vampire and instead afflict this curse onto a family member that they felt wronged by. So you go through this journey of them traveling back home and you see them withering away, and it's I like this. I like to see someone mentally on this mission as their body is deteriorating them, and their only thing that's keeping them alive is this drive of personal revenge for feeling wronged by this family member. And so like I've been looking at like between like watching like I'm watching The Addiction again, and
Ooh, yeah.
The Addiction's a goodie.
That's a good one.
The Hunger, I love The Hunger.
You're going with the oldies and the goodies.
I've been wanting to make a vampire film for a long time, and I just was trying to figure out like the right story for it. And
I'm not opposed to this at all.
And I've always been like, well, I like the fascination of like seeing the death of a vampire and seeing the evolution of a vampire in like modern age and whatnot. And I think The Addiction and The Hunger are films that touch on that in interesting ways. Only Lovers Left Alive is a good example, and Let Me In, Let the Right One In, those films, in terms of like vampire kind of modern aesthetic. And then of course looking at Nosferatu again and Vampire from like 1923, and then body horror wise, it's like The Fly, just watching him deteriorate over time, or the Thing, and just like the Thing's practical effects are insane and amazing, and really show grotesque imagery and whatnot. Was it Body Melt is really fascinating. The Blob, the 1990 Blob. Like there's a lot of like great body horror. I'm trying to think of some other standout ones, but those are like the classics that come to mind.
Have you watched Blood Red Sky?
No, I haven't. What's that?
We recently watched that for International Horror Films episode we did. It's a German film. I mean, I guess I'll give it away because whatever, it's early on. But like, it's a vampire film.
Okay.
But it's similar thing, like the going how like the de-evolution. Would you even called it a de-evolution? The transformation from human to vampire, and like how just that slow process to watch it and see that come into play, because it almost looks like cancer.
Yeah,
and it's just like, I don't know. I think based on what you're describing, I think you'd really like that one.
I'll take a look at that for sure. Like another one that stood out was what is it? It's a werewolf film that came out like in 2000. It's Ginger Snaps.
Yes.
Ginger Snaps is another really good one.
Ginger Snaps.
Yeah. Like in terms of like a body horror kind of like de-evolution kind of thing. But Blood Red Sky. I got that noted down right now.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
And it threw us off because like it starts off and you think it's a completely different film. Like is this a hijacking film? Like what is this? And it's got like, who is it that it threw me off? Because I'm like, am I watching the right film? What actor was it that it started off with?
No.
I mean, he's in it. But
that guy. I know who you're talking about.
Graham McTavish.
Yes.
Graham McTavish. Yeah, it starts with Graham McTavish, and so I'm like, this is it. He doesn't do horror. So I go look, make sure I'm watching the right one. Totally the right one. And I love him too. But yeah, it's a good film. I think you'd like it.
I'll give it a poke.
Totally
I didn't know. Yeah.
Totally goes from dusk till dawn on your ass.
Oh yeah, because Dusk Till Dawn, you don't know it's a vampire film until like more than halfway through. It's
20 minutes. Yeah,
it's a pretty straight film. It's a pretty straight crime film until you get to the palace and whatnot.
And that's what you think this is.
Yeah,
it's like,
pretty much.
You think you're watching like an action hijacking type film, and then all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Nope, that's not what that is.
Yeah.
Even I had to look to see if I was watching the same thing. I'm like, wait, is this right? Like, no.
It's the right movie. But it was decent. And I think you'd like it if you like body horror, you like the transformation process. Ginger Snaps is a great one. I love Ginger Snaps.
Yeah, that one
I don't think that one gets enough like love. I don't think it gets
Ginger
enough.
Snaps. I just watched it for the first time, I think, last year, and was like, this movie's great. I don't know how I slept on this thing. It's really good, and I'm surprised it hasn't like had more recognition. I think it's a really effective werewolf film, and I think those are kind of hard to do between The Howling and American Werewolf in London. Obviously, it's kind of like one of the Hall of Famers, but yeah, not a lot of horror, not a lot of werewolf films that like kind of stand on their own. Like
Yeah. I love that you started off like in your youth and partial adulthood not doing horror, not being into horror, and now you're referencing like 1920s films and Rosemary's Baby. It's like you went back and educated yourself, and I love that.
It was such a enriching couple years there because I went and did This Pretty Face, which is kind of like this almost David Lynch kind of neon. Well, it was before Neon Demon came out, but it's very much so similar to Neon Demon in terms like this beauty horror and whatnot. And I was like really like compelled by that genre. So then I was like, okay, well, what do I want to touch on next? And then Emiko was like the next project that came up, and that came to like what I wanted to make next. And that's when I really got into like, because I was like really big into Japanese cinema, but I wasn't big into like the horror side of it, and I didn't realize the expansive range of J horror that between like 1990 to like 2005 in particular. Like the biggest influence for that film is Audition and Dark Water and and The Wailing. More so, well, that is, sorry, that's South Korean. Pulling a lot of those influences though, and watching Ju-on, The Grudge, and Ringu, and yeah, like going back. Oh, Anibaba from like 1960, and A Page of Madness from like the 20s. Like there was a lot of like a lot of great expansive Japanese horror that stretches so far back, and I was really interested with that. And recently I've been kind of getting more into like looking into like more European horror, like anything from any kind of Bergman film that's been like made in like the 60s or 50s at that point, between like the Hour of the Wolf and Cries and Whispers, and there's another film he made that was horror. But yeah, there's been kind of like, I wanted to kind of really like, getting to know a lot of American horror cinema. I then wanted to like expand more to be like, okay, well, what is it that American audiences aren't seeing that I can like take influence from, and not like what's the word? I don't want to
Not plagiarizing it,
not
just
plagiarizing,
being inspired.
more so like appropriating. I didn't want to like
Okay.
I didn't want to like, because this was a discussion about Emiko, was that I'm a white dude making a film that's taking a lot of influence from Japanese horror, and I had another white dude argue with me about like the merits of taking Asian cinema and making it. And I was like, well, I'm not like out here like taking Yuki Onna, I believe is the white dressed spirit that navigates through the woods and whatnot in Japanese folklore. I'm not like trying to like modernize that look and like make it feel like, oh, there's Yuki Onna and whatnot. I'm trying to like have like, I'm trying to take elements of what makes Japanese horror so good and make it more inspired and not make it feel appropriated. Because the last thing I want to do is take the things that I love about that subgenre of horror, that culture of horror, and do like what Scary Movie does with it, or like or emphasize on its on not cliches, but stereotypes. I didn't want to like. I wanted to far and away, like, I wanted to make Emiko from a place of love, because I do love Japanese cinema a lot, and I definitely wanted to like be very mindful about like casting a Japanese actress for it, Japanese American actress for it, and having it have my flair with it, but like be aware of like the Japanese elements that I was infusing with it. Like it was the first film I did in 1771, which is like what the 1990s like kind of Japanese format was at the time, especially like the film Audition. So, and it's an influence that I've kind of kept in my films moving forward. Between this and Purple and From the Depths, it's all 1771. So it's slightly it doesn't have the bars as for 2351. So like there are things that I've carried over, but like at the end of the day, between like being mindful of folklore that we pull from, and other horror films, like we didn't want to plagiarize or appropriate. We wanted to be very respectful and take inspiration and not go too far with being like, is that, stereotyping or in bad taste. So
Yeah. Well, and you do have a very unique style. So the I took a peek at your Vimeo for your other films, and because like I said before, the Purple Vision is very unique to me in the way it's stylized and the way that it's executed. And looking at your other films, it seems to be something that like that's just your style. That's the style that carries through. And I love your use of colors.
Thank you.
Like there is a neon feel to it, and
Yeah.
it's done in this rich, saturated way that it's not like, ooh, I'm watching a Vegas video. It carries
Yeah.
this tone with it that is unsettling. It's beautiful and unsettling.
I love like those vibrant kind of like, really like I guess it's not as aggressive as like a film like Suspiria, but like it does have that kind of like that flair of like, the color is working as a theme for the film too, and just kind of its overlooming presence and whatnot. So like, and for purple in particular, I love purple. It's my favorite color. So I was like, well, gotta make this into a film somehow. So
It shows.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and it's fun because the color choices that you use, not only are they a color, they lend to the color palette. They are the color palette, but they also are part of the lighting, and so it's like an additional light source. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I really love the way you translate the horror world.
Thank you. I lot, and at the end of the day, it's like I know exactly kind of what I'm aiming for and looking for, but like if I didn't have like my like go-to homies for it, like all my movies have been lit by Matthew Rush, who is a tremendous like filmmaker in his own rights, and but like he works like in the industry right now. He works as a grip and electric gaffer and has lit all my movies. And between him working with my the two DPs that I've worked with recently, Kevin O'Donnell, who did From the Depths and Emiko, gorgeous lighting, and then David Burns, who did Purple. Like again, just like having those two side by side, was a easy day technically on set, because they just knew exactly kind of what I was going for in terms of the lighting aesthetic of it all.
That's great. That's so awesome. Now, for you, given that you've given yourself a full education and you're continuing to expand it on horror, where would you say the sweet spot is for horror in terms of like time periods?
Ooh, right now, I think like anything right now, because I think if you look at like all the best horror films that have come out, they take place in the now and they're critiquing the now, and that's what attracts me the most to horror is kind of like films that like are looking back or that are reflecting on what's happening then and there. So like John Carpenter does this a lot, like with the Thing is kind of like Cold War tension, again another extension of AIDS and whatnot, but also They Live is a great example of consumerism at the time, and capitalism at that point, and just the politics of that time. But I don't know if he has that so much now, but like him kind of touching on those current themes while making it very much so entertaining and original, I think speaks volumes, and why it still is looked at very favorably. Looking at like movies now, it's like we'll talk Midsummer again. Midsummer, I think, is a great movie about like dealing with trauma and relationships in the modern age, and like how people are gaslit, and how one person navigates through those dramatic times and looking for a community and whatnot. And I think a lot of people in particular now are looking for a sense of, belonging and community and like, self-healing. There's a lot of like people that I think are going through self-healing. And I think Midsommar is a good example of that. So I think any movie that can take place in the now and critique the now, I think are films that are I don't want to say they're more rich than films that take place in different time periods, because those are as important too, because you could have films that like, again, Godzilla -1 is a good example of like a film that takes place in 1945, but it's talking about like very, it's more of like, that's a movie reflecting back on, Japanese pride and Japanese kind of like where American influence was at that point too. And it's very kind of reflective. And Shin Godzilla does the same thing in terms like, well, Shin Godzilla is a good example of a modern film that critiques, that is like looking at the incidents that Japan went through in 2010 with the big tsunami and everything, and the nuclear power reactor kind of damaging Japan at that point, and how that film kind of critiques like the handlement of that by its Japanese government and the red tape that everyone had to go through with that, and American involvement throughout, like from post World War II to now. It's like, I think movies that take place in the now and dissect now is really like, really where I think the best kind of material is coming from. Again, like I would always love to, like I would love to make I would love to make a horror film period piece pirate movie. But I think I'm more interested in the now right now, and if I am able to make that one day, then I'm here for it. But I gotta find a theme or a story that like I think would be relevant to what audiences would be looking for, and if it's engaging and entertaining enough, that would work.
I mean, you had me at pirate horrors.
Not enough of them.
No, and I could see your viewpoint. I know we've talked to people in the past, and we've never had anyone say that like right now is the sweet spot. So I love that you're bringing that perspective in, because you're right. Like, it's going to connect to the time that you're watching it because it's relevant to what you're experiencing right now. We can't relate to what someone went through in the 30s. We weren't there. We don't know we can do the historical research, but we don't know what it felt like to go through those things. So you make a very good point on that.
I'm very intrigued by the like how people react to something emotionally, and that's the thing, like with the thing that I'm writing right now is very much so kind of like based on like regret and nostalgia and like the potency of nostalgia. So it's like I think we are like, again, like I think the now is very much so concerned and very reminiscent about nostalgia and a better time. So like I think there are things thematically that can be examined and expressed upon in horror cinema.
How do you find with your horror education, how are you finding the directions to go? Because it sounds like the context around things, like the context behind The Fly and other films that you've been watching, like what's going on societally. And I want you to know we only have one other person we talk to on the regular that knows the extent of that. so I'm curious, like, how do you go about tackling that when you're approaching what horror films to watch?
So like what I've always been curious about, like like comedy, you like horror can fall into the same trappings of like we become so familiar with something after a certain amount of time that I'm like, well, what is something that I'm not aware of that works elsewhere that could work here? Like the way that Swedish horror like elevates like just like really like intense like narrative trauma and tension and spectacle within just like the harrowing cries of like someone going through the terror, and it's very dramatic and big. And I think Possession is another great example of I think that's it's a Polish film, I think. I know it's a European film. I don't know where exactly it is. But that's a great film where like the performances are so loud and big, but they're so unique and they're so like engaging in their own way. It's like I've never seen anything like this before, and it's like I just want like anything like and again, just bringing it back to like to Japanese work. Like I look at like the work of like Junji Ito, who's like this terrific manga artist that makes a lot of like horror manga stories, and that like for me is an extension of the Twilight Zone, where it's these vignettes, but it's more very much so like these body horror like images that are just so grotesque and so beyond, and it's something that I don't think right now American cinema is providing, and that's something that that intrigues me, is like foreign cinema that is like expanding on horror that the American cinema wouldn't typically touch on. I think we're kind of getting there. I think, whether you agree with the term or not, elevated horror from A24, I think, they are putting out horror films that are very much so unique, while, Blumhouse is putting out like, your more traditional horror films like that we're more accustomed to. But then, Neon's coming out with it's not quite a horror film, but it does have horror adjacent elements to it. But like Titan is a film that came out a couple years ago about like this woman who like gets impregnated by a car, and it's pretty wicked.
Oh yeah, that was a weird one.
That was a weird one, but like like again, like it's got this really interesting kind of like there's like
you can love your car, but she loved her car.
She loved her car, and it's weird. It's like I look at that film and I'm like, this movie is so many things. Like, is it a film about is it about transgenderism? Is it about like father-daughter abandonment? I mean, what is this film? Is so many different things. But ultimately it's like she gives birth to like some car baby thing, and it's the most wild thing on earth. And I'm like, car what is this?
You might say it was a wild ride.
But
Here all night.
But like, yeah, like between like that's and that's another thing too, is like, I think I particularly have been like looking at like, female filmmakers more so, because they are coming out with so many there are so many great like thriller or horror films by female filmmakers that I don't think is talked enough about. There's a movie by Lynn Ramsey called You Were Never Really Here, and it takes like this thriller, this typical kind of like assassin thriller plot line, and completely reverses it on its own. It's like an anti-Taxi Driver film, but the way that she evokes this kind of like the violence through this film, and Joaquin Phoenix is in it. He's terrific, and I like that's a great example of, or like, yeah, like the filmmaker of Titan and Raw. Like she has got this very visceral like viewpoint of like how violence is depicted and whatnot. So it's like it's very interesting to kind of like not only watch like films outside of the country to see what horror is like out there and what's working for those audiences, but it's also interesting to watch from like different culturally and gender wise too, because there are so many different viewpoints that like I'm coming at it from like my own like viewpoint, but if I can like enrich myself more from foreign and culturally and gender wise too, I'd love to like absorb all that and try to make something somewhat as close to something as unique as those other filmmakers. And I don't know, like I'm always like, where is horror working at strongly? And I look at South Korea, I look at Japan, I look at France, I look at Germany. There's so many great like horror films all around us right now, and I just always try to keep my ear to the ground with that stuff.
Yeah, it's absolutely like I know people fear appropriation, but for me, when we look to other cultures, when we're looking to Japanese horror, any kind of horror outside of our own, we're really just expanding and enhancing our lens.
Yeah.
Because there is so much more out there, and there's different ways to tell a story that it really does help to see. It's just like literature, right?
Yeah.
If you read literature from different countries, you're not really appropriating it when you read those, and when you're inspired by the way that they write, you're more inspired, and it really does expand our worldview and our lens, which I think we need, right? Like, we need to expand that lens. And so for you, I would say you're sleeping on one area of the world.
Which area is that?
Central and South America.
I agree with that. That's a blind spot of mine. I do need to look at that part of the world more. There's India horror that I'm missing out on.
Yes.
There's so much more horror that I haven't delve into yet. Like, I've just recently been getting into Dogma 95, which is a whole journey of itself. So it's like there's definitely blind spots that they have, and that's the beauty of horror and film in general, is that I still have all this, because sometimes I feel like, oh, have I seen it all? I'm like, far from that. There's still so much out there, and I definitely want to keep enriching myself with that. And
Malaysia started to do a lot more horror now too, and it's like, oh wow, I love it. And I watched one, and John laughs at me, but I watched one. It's Don't Look at the Demon. That is a Malaysian film, and they incorporate some of their lore into it. And it's stuff where you're just like, you watch it and you're like, okay, here's another paranormal investigation show. But then you watch it and you see the origin behind their demon, and you see the origin behind that, and you're like, oh, this is fucking genius. I love this. So that's good. Now, speaking of things to watch, where can people watch your films?
You can watch my films over at vimeo.com/Vinall, Vinall. You can also find it all on YouTube right now. We have behind the scenes material out there as well for most of my projects. You can find it on YouTube at Justin Robert Vinall or Next Floor Entertainment. And then we're all over social media, Instagram, Twitter X, I don't know what we're calling it these days. Facebook, all that jazz. We're everywhere, wherever there's a social media platform at.
Amazing. Now, to wrap things up, I would like to ask you one final question.
Yeah.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Oh, man. Let me tell you something.
John just gave me the weirdest face.
I'm like, that came out of nowhere.
Look, we always talk about paranormal experiences on this podcast, so I'm curious.
I don't know if I necessarily believe in it, but I'm very intrigued by it, and intrigued enough that I want to go to a haunted house one of these days. But I love stuff whether it's real or not, but the Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures stuff. I eat that shit up so much. So I 100% I'm about it. I don't know if I believe it yet, but I'm definitely please.
If you like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, check out Project Fear on YouTube.
Project Fear? All right, I'm going to check that out.
One of the guys, Dakota Layden, he started off making parody videos about Zach from Ghost Adventures and then ended up being part of their team. And then they did this whole different Fear show that Zach kind of produced, and then they canceled him after 4 seasons or something. So now he does his own stuff on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
And
okay, I'll definitely check it out.
It's him, his sister, and their best friend. They all grew up together with paranormal experiences. It's an amazing show. I absolutely love those guys.
Dude, I know what I'm watching tonight.
yeah.
that
Now-
and Blood Red Sky. I got them
Yes,
ready
Blood
to go.
Yes.
Now, since you are about it and you want to find out more about it, have you heard of, and like, what's the most haunted spot in your area?
You know what? The only spot I've heard that's haunted is in Port Townsend. There's like a hotel there that I guess is haunted. I was there for work a couple times, but I didn't know that until like way after. I was like, well, fuck, I would have gone there. But that would be the only other spot. I know there's like spooky. Oh, you know what? Actually, there was this one production I worked on as a script supervisor where we were filming in this old abandoned house, and there was this one room that felt fucking heavy. Like, it was heavy, and I was like, I don't feel good. This is like, there's something weird here. You could walk in any other spot in the house, but that one spot there was fucking dark. Like, it was like this old abandoned house that like I don't know if people said it was like haunted or whatnot, but we all like would go there and be in that spot and be like, this something's up here, something's weird right here. So I forgot about that. That was like a production I worked on in 2019, and that was a fun gig. But that was like an overnight, and it was fucking spooky.
So we're gonna need that address. No,
I wonder if I have the call sheets for it still. But yeah, no, that spot was weird. It was a really like weird spot. I liked it though. It was fun.
of course you did. Of course you did. So I liked it. From the guy who, as a kid, hated horror movies, now loves haunted houses. So literal haunted houses.
Complete turn. Yeah, I'm
Complete
all
turnaround.
I'm all here for it. It's any and all of it. I'm so fascinated by it all.
All right, guys. Do we have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No. Again, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, like again, this was so much fun talking horror and a little bit of Star Wars. Yeah. And then yeah, just kind of talking about Washington film in general too. I thought that was worth chatting about too, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been amazing. And of course, I mean, I could keep going, but I'm not going to hold you hostage for hours. That's,
no, you're golden. I could go on forever.
That's the second episode. All right, John Thomas, you want to bring us home?
I do. And my final thought, fuck Kylo Ren again.
Hey, watch your filthy fucking mouth. And this is how 3Haunted ended. Like,
oh no, I take it back.
Big drama.
Unfuck Kylo Ren.
All over Kylo Ren.
Unfuck him. He's back. He's good. He's okay.
He's a good guy now.
Yeah,
he's the
cool.
best guy there was. Well, the murder. What murder?
Oh Jesus. But yes, thank you for coming on, Justin. It's been a blast. Like Ashley said, part 2. Why not? Let's do another one.
Dude, love to be back. Yeah, thank you so much again.
Yeah.
Yes. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening to this episode of 3Haunted Podcast with your host. I'm John Thomas, I think.
I am Ashley Lunar Goddess.
I threw her off. And if you have any episode suggestions, comments, or questions, please feel free to email us at 3hauntedpodcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so already, please like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media. You don't want to miss amazing guests like Mr. Justin here.
Until next time.